Would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, like where you work, what you're doing, and what you're up to during the crisis?
So the crisis for me, well, I'm a nurse, been a nurse for a long, long, long time. So luckily I'm one of the select few that still get to earn a paycheck, I suppose, right now. But I'm working in a high risk OBGYN office. So with this COVID, of course, you can't put pregnancy on hold. Even for a virus. So we've staggered our ladies. We're seeing one every 30 minutes so we can kind of get them in and get them out, and dressed in the personal protective equipment with masks and gowns. And it's just, as scared as I am, and I think this is the first time in my entire career that I've actually been afraid of germs. I try to put myself in these ladies' shoes that are near giving birth during this horrible time where nobody wants to be around a hospital. And so I find myself doing as much as I can for them, more hand-holding and more reassuring. And I feel I'm doing more good by just being there mentally for these ladies, to just sit and hold their hand and tell them everything's going to be okay, and assure them that our OB unit is, top notch and clean as a whistle, and they're going to come out with a brand new baby that's healthy as a horse. So
putting yourself on the front lines
putting myself
for your
on the front
countrymen
line
is putting yourself on the front lines for your countrymen is a family tradition, it
or
seems.
my country women.
And country women, yeah, because I mean, I don't think it's ironic. I think it's apropos that your father was the longest held POW in American history, an American hero, and his daughter right now is on the front lines of the biggest threat we've ever faced, the biggest that we've faced in modern American history right now. So thank you for that. Thank you for
Oh my
continuing your
goodness,
father's
I couldn't
tradition.
imagine. It's part of the vows that I took, and to sit home right now and be safe would be absolutely the most cowardly thing I could do. And I think my father would roll over in his grave. He'd be kicking my rear end from heaven saying, "Get out there, soldier, you've
Get
got a
out there,
job to
do
do."
something, soldier.
That's right.
Start with a dirty dozen first thing in the morning, then get to work.
That's right. Yep. So
Alrighty.
hopefully I'm honoring him by continuing to go to work every day and protecting
That
these
much is
beautiful
clear.
babies.
Absolutely.
Protecting these beautiful
Alrighty.
babies.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted to talk to you today was because, um, you know, the relationship I have with you and your family, I think is pretty unique in the opera world, because often when we are playing a character on stage, especially when we're doing more traditional work, we're so far removed from the reality of that character. And one of the great things about playing your father, Colonel Floyd James Thompson, is that because of the wonders of social media and technology, I was able to connect with you way back before I even started working on the piece, when I started building the character. And I found that your insights into your father were invaluable in helping me tell his story, and is going to be about those things. That's what this show is about. It's about those magical moments, those goose flesh moments that we're all missing right now, because the thing about opera and live theater and dance, there's something about a group catharsis that you just can't get from a digital screen. And now that we're all forced into the digital landscape, I thought that we would try to remind our public of the magical moments that we all had together, and whether that be artist to artist or artist to audience member like yourself. So, I would just like sort of, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your dad and a little bit about his story. Maybe, we don't have to go through the whole novel, but maybe just a short explanation of who your father was and his significance in American history, and what sort of brought us to this point with this story.
Well, my goodness, where to start, Michael? So Colonel Floyd James Thompson. He left for Vietnam, a country he had never heard of, when I was not quite 4 years old. And he got home when I was 13. And I had very vague memories of him as a child. So my memories were clouded by, of course, my mom. She didn't want to talk about it. We were told he died from a snake bite. He was captured shortly after being in Vietnam. He was on a reconnaissance mission that was not his mission to take. He was covering for a buddy that had too much to drink the night before and didn't want the guy to get into trouble. So he flew co-pilot on a recon mission, and their plane was shot down. Unfortunately, the pilot, they assume, was dead. And my dad was taken captive and held 9 years in a POW prison camp in Vietnam. The last 5 of those being in solitary confinement. So I knew, at 13 years old, I expected this man to just come be my hero and come be the dad that I've been missing for so long. And what I was met with was such a severely broken individual that, I'm sorry, that's my cat.
No apologies for children or magical creatures in town.
We just didn't know how to act because this poor man was just beyond broken. He didn't know who he was anymore, much less how to be a husband, how to be a father. He left when we were all so little and came back, and we were full of sass. And we didn't know how to handle him. No. He didn't know how to handle us. It was a tough time.
Yeah.
We would try to ask him what had happened over there. He wouldn't talk about it, never would talk about it. And honestly, I learned more about what he went through from interviews that he did with other people, other reporters, that type of thing. And I was so hungry for the truth. I remember just grabbing magazines and articles that they would hide the newspapers from us because they didn't want us children reading that. Oh yeah. And I would get up in the middle of the night out of my bed and sneak into my father's study and just read absolutely everything I could. And of course that just opened more questions. Wow. But if I asked those questions, he would know, where did you get this information? So
goodness. Isn't it, it really is an interesting point to me that he was so comfortable speaking with the general public about his experience to the Rotary clubs and church congregations and things like that. But
he just clammed up tight. He would not discuss it at all. I remember the nightmares he used to have would wake the whole house up. He would just wake up shrieking and screaming. And that was tough. I understood why he related to people that were not a family. At first, I was kind of jealous of it in a 13-year-old way. I never understood why here's my father. He wouldn't share that part of himself with us, that he was more comfortable to share himself with strangers. But the older I got, the more it made sense. When there's no emotional attachment, it was almost cathartic for him to just be able to cut loose with a stranger or a reporter.
Yeah.
Where he didn't want us as his family crying for him or pitying him.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your father towards the end of his life?
Well, he went through, the alcoholism and the drug abuse, and he had some suicide attempts. Really completely hit rock bottom with his last suicide attempt. And he was forced into AA. And AA was absolutely one of the best things that ever could have happened to him. at the time, because not only was he able to give up the alcohol, but a lot of the demons that kind of pushed him towards the alcohol in the first place. And the demons were
Yeah.
Vietnam, the bad marriages, the inability to connect with his own children because there was such a generation gap. But we were able to come together
Mhm.
after all of that. And we had a great relationship. And I went on to get married and had 2 little boys. And the relationship started to deteriorate really when I got married, because he was no longer the only thing in my life. Now I had to separate my time, and I wasn't able to just fly down to
Right.
Florida at the drop of a hat. But he, of course, he had the stroke, and he started to really deteriorate mentally and physically. And he had given me a
Mhm.
choice. You either love your mother or you love me. And I couldn't
Oh my goodness.
understand. I said, Dad, you can't force me to make that choice. I love you both. No, in his cryptic language after the stroke, you must choose. And I said, well, I can't. And he basically said, well, I choose for you. And he
Oh,
cut all of us children out of his life. Um,
wow.
so every Christmas card, every birthday card, he would take the time to tear it in half and put it in an envelope and send it back to me. And that was his wish. He didn't want any of us there, cut us all out of the will. Uh, and my biggest regret was that I just didn't hop on a plane and force him to just sit down with me. And I don't know if it would have made any difference at all, but it just kills me that he died alone
Yeah.
when he had 4 children that desperately loved him,
Yeah.
you know? But, and I'll tell you something, Michael, it took a long time. I wanted to forgive him so badly. And it wasn't until the opera came out that made me really realize the hell that he went through, um, to come to the understanding that there was nothing to forgive ever. He couldn't help it. He couldn't help it. That all those years in the prison camp, how do you ever come back from something like that? And I never stopped to realize the hell that both of my parents truly went through until I was an adult and was able to see the opera and hear my parents' words coming out of your mouths. The opera has been incredibly healing for me as an adult woman now, to be able to live what each of my parents went through, all those horrible, tormented emotions, just the desperation, the loss, the anger, the pain. To see it on stage, portrayed by you wonderful actors and singers, made me see a side of my parents that I never saw before, never even considered
Oh,
it, and I will never get tired of going to it, because every time I go, I see and I hear something different.
it's such a. I mean, it speaks exactly. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked up too.
Yeah, me too.
Everyone that I know in this business, that's their goal in life. That to tell a story that helps. To tell a story that helps, and you brought up a really interesting point when you said you never get tired of it because you've seen it many times now, and you've
Mhm.
seen many different people tell your family a story. And each time you see it, you see a different person's perspective on that story that they have read and researched and studied. And it's, I mean, to to um to know that we as a community have been able to do something that had that kind of effect on a real person's life, or an actual person that know we can talk to, we can see today. It is it is the greatest reward that any of us could ever receive.
You have to feel part of what my father went through. You have to get into his head.
Yeah.
And I know it's got to be as gut-wrenching for the performers. I mean, bravo to you brave souls that take this on,
What I always
because
say
it,
about I use Colonel Thompson a lot as an example when people talk about, because I do a lot of what we call opera with a conscience, and it's usually opera that has some sort of a purpose other than entertainment. It speaks to some social, political, cultural issue that is enduring that we're trying to solve as a society. And this is one of them. And when I talk about playing characters like this, they do take a toll on you. And Colonel Thompson's a deep cut. When you play Colonel Thompson, it's a deep cut. You're cutting down into the quick of what you have emotionally. The devastating truth that's contained within that is that you're only experiencing a small fraction of what the person lived with their entire life.
Mhm.
And so that's, for me, always the incredibly humbling part of this job, is that, yes, we get to feel it, but we don't have to feel it like they felt it. And
Right.
thank God for that, because I know that I'm a pretty tough guy, but I could not have survived the way your dad did. It's just amazing.
He had
I wanted
grit.
to ask you a little bit about, from our perspective, when we were doing this in Nashville, and we went, me and the cast went out and visited your mom's grave, and sort of took in the area. And knowing you guys were coming, the whole cast was just so nervous, because we knew that this is not a John McCain story where they
Mhm.
throw parades and ticker tape and everyone's talking about how great everything went for this guy when he came back and triumphed over adversity. I don't know, that performance for me was one of the pinnacle moments of my career, just having you guys there and having that catharsis with you and with the audience, and all on the stage at the same time. It was just moving. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like from your perspective in Nashville?
It was very healing for all, because it touches us all in a different way, because we were all different ages when we went through this with our parents. We kind of saw things differently and were affected in just different ways. So, and the four of us kids have never had the opportunity to just sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
As crazy as that seems, it was just something that was constantly, my lifetime, swept under the rug. And it started with my father not wanting to talk about his feelings, and then the divorce, they don't want to talk about it. And it was nothing but disharmony for so long.
But when you watch the show, sometimes do you feel, or when you read the book, do you feel that you get a different perspective on your mother from show
Oh,
to show, or
absolutely. I
from
mean,
the book to the opera?
I went for a long time just questioning my mother's choices, like I'm sure a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the audience members do, and I lived it. And I couldn't understand how she could do, or some of the choices that she made. As a woman, I couldn't understand how you could do that until I became a mother myself. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you do whatever you can to protect your kids from pain and sorrow. And if that sometimes means withholding or distorting the truth a little bit. But then when I saw the opera, I hold my mother in such high esteem now, because I don't know if I'd have done anything different. Um,
Yeah.
I just think she did absolutely the best she could with the hand she was dealt. I miss her. I miss both of them. And my poor dad, my gosh, the hell he went through in Vietnam, it didn't end when he landed on American soil. I mean, he died with a broken heart, and it's just a goddamn shame.
Well, that's a great place to sort of lead into what I like to call the story that sort of defines our relationship between me and you and your father and your family, and when we came to, we did the performance in Nashville, and I'll just sort of lead you, and I'll let you take the story over because I really am.
Okay.
It's been a few years, so I want to make sure I've got the details right. But I remember standing on this just off the stage. It was just a small raised platform is all the stage was, and we were standing there.
Mhm.
You know, everyone was congregated around. Your family was there, and people were talking and moving. And I was had just finished a conversation. I was standing there like you do after a performance sometimes, and you're in the meet and greet. You're sort of looking like, who do I need to talk to? You know, who have I missed? And I see you, and you cross over, and you cross over the stage, and you walk up to me, and you sort of took my hand in your hand, and you held my hand in like a handshake, and you just held it, and you said some words to me. Do you remember what you said in that moment?
Well, I just knew what I was going to do. But after the first time I saw you perform, I thought, this is a man that has the courage to take on the role of my father and all of the ugliness that it entails. And you did an absolutely amazing job. And when you sing, I'm home, that absolutely undoes me every single time, because I mean, it just starts, I mean, my soul just bleeds when you say that. I thought, you know, as much courage as it took for my dad to go through the hell he went through and the continued hell when he got on American soil, and he battled the alcoholism and came out on the other side. And I have this coin, and I I just knew the courage that you had to have deep within to take on this role, and the courage that you would need to continue doing this, because we all need that little talisman of something that just means. And I thought, if anybody in the world deserves this coin, it's Michael, because my father worked so hard and earned this with his blood, sweat, and tears. And you earned the right to wear my father's uniform with the blood, sweat, and tears that you poured into your performance in getting to know him and bleeding your heart out on stage. And you will always be my soul brother. And I had to give you that coin, because you exemplify the man that my father was.
I can tell you that I take that coin with me. I took that coin with me when I stepped on some very big stages that were in big moments in my career, because I felt like I always wanted to have him there with me and have you there with me. But one of the things you said to me that just sort of stuck was that you said, like, you're holding my hand, you know, and this, I mean, we're both so emotionally raw at that moment because we just been through this experience, and you're holding my hand, and I feel this metal in my palm. And I think you said that your dad had given it to you when you were going through a very hard time,
He did.
because it had always given him strength, because he would
Yes.
use it, you know, when he felt tempted, he would rub it.
He
And
would
he said
rub
it,
that
he
between
gave it to you, and
his thumb and his forefinger. He would
yeah,
rub that coin, and I was going through such a bad time, and that's exactly what he told me.
yeah. He said that it gave him strength, and it gave you
It gave
strength,
him strength.
and that you've been holding on to it for 30 years, and you wanted me to hold on to it for the next 30.
That's right.
And I have to tell you, Laura, it's one of the greatest honors of my life. And there are times in my life when I find myself forgetting about what's important in this world and what's important and why I'm doing this. When I reach in and I grab that coin, I
It
know
puts you
why
into
I'm doing this, because
perspective,
I have
doesn't
an
it?
example of why I'm doing this.
Yes. That coin is strength personified. I mean, it's just, think of what it got my dad through.
Yeah.
And I could write my own book for what it got me through. And you deserve it.
One of these days, when it's time for me to pass that along, we're going to have a nice story to tell about that coin and its connection to the world that we live in, because it really is so connected to American history. into our personal history. I'm so thankful to you and your family for allowing us in the opera world a little peek in what it's like to be you. And it gives me so much joy and comfort to know that we have returned some of that to your family and to you. And
Absolutely.
I
I
just want to
can't
thank
even
you.
put into words how much this opera has meant for me as far as healing goes. Just the acceptance and all good things, you know, as hard as it is, and as much as I still cry in the audience, I come away a better person every time I sit through it. And I've got the soundtrack, and I just close my eyes and I know who's on stage during each piece. And there is nothing that means more to me than the talisman I gave you, that coin, as far as strength goes, than this opera. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
This
Absolutely.
opera is one of the most performed operas in the country right now. And I believe it's the most performed contemporary American opera in the repertoire right now. So, you know, your father's story is reaching a lot of people, and a lot of people that need to hear it.
You know, I think the more people that make it an effort and take their time to go to the opera will somehow, some way come out being better human beings.
I know having sung it, that's true for me. You know, I know for a fact that this piece helped people because they told me. I know for a fact that this piece helped people in Memphis because they told me. And I know that this piece helped your family because you told me.
Without a doubt.
And
Without a
that
doubt.
is the thing that I'm the most proud of in my life. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't thank the Toms, Tom Philpott and Tom Cipullo,
Oh,
for bringing this
absolutely.
story to life.
Absolutely. I have always had walls built up around me just because of the way I was raised and all of that. So I just haven't shared this with a lot of people because it's so hard. Where do you start? Well, it
The
is.
fact that you can tell it in an opera in 77 minutes is miraculous, but Tom Cipullo somehow made that possible. Well, I just wanted to quickly wrap up here, and I wanted to thank you for coming on the show, The Quick, and thank you for cutting to the quick of our emotional connection.
Well,
I
I
know
wish
that
you
this
the
kind of
best
stuff,
with everything.
I really wanted to say thank you for being so open and forthright and willing to share with us, because everyone that has listened to this podcast and or seen the opera or read the book understands how tremendously painful Colonel Thompson's experience was, and in turn how that must have had ripple effects on your family. And I just thank you so much for being so open and sharing that with us and not being afraid to tell the truth and to look this thing in
Absolutely,
the eye.
Michael.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Are you kidding me? You're the
All right.
best.